TBS.
The TV fans are taking over. This is Across the Airwaves.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Across the Airwaves, the podcast dedicated to giving weekly TV show episode reviews along with news and opinions on the television industry. I'm Dan Schmidt, your host and resident tough cop, and with me is my co-host and not so silent cop.
Hey everybody, it's Nico. This week we will be discussing the third episodes for the new seasons of Chuck, Castle, Bones, Fringe, Smallville, and Supernatural.
And we're just going to get things started with our discussion about Chuck and the episode Chuck versus the Cubic Z.
In this episode, Chuck and Sarah's rivals Hugo Panzer and Heather Chandler return bringing plenty of trouble and hints about Chuck's mom. Meanwhile, while Morgan prepares the Buy More for a huge video game release, he gets a surprise from Big Mike.
This week's Chuck can be best described as a vintage episode, through it featuring a staple of this show, the musical montage sequence that I affectionately call a pineapple. The chain of events that led to yet another pineapple incident at the Buy More began with Sarah developing a fear of being forced to settle down with Chuck and have kids. This drama gets enhanced when Chuck and Sarah have to babysit Heather, Sarah's high school nemesis, if you remember her from that episode back in Season 2, and they also have to deal with Hugo, a villain from back in Season 3. There was the episode where Chuck was on the airplane and they introduced Kristen Cruick's character on the show. And if you remember, Hugo was a ring operative played by wrestler Stone Cold Steve Austin. And basically how they cross paths with Chuck and Sarah again is by them going through a prison transfer. And what happens is the car that they're being transported in gets a flat tire, so they're sent to the Buy More for holding until a helicopter can come and pick them up. And with that setup, I wasn't really looking forward to this episode because of my disdain for Nicole Richie, who played Heather in this episode. And I didn't really like her that much in the Season 2 episode entitled Chuck versus the Cougars. However, I could stand Nicole Richie better in this episode than her first appearance through Heather being played off like Shaw. In other words, the writers channeled our hatred for Miss Richie into the drama between Chuck and Sarah by having the character of Heather constantly taunting Sarah about the fact that she could never settle down with a guy like Chuck. Heather taunting Sarah also set up a great interrogation scene where the writers were able to generate comedy out of Sarah in the right blend that Nico and I were looking for, through Sarah's frustration causing her to blame Chuck for blowing their tough cop, silent cop routine when she really was the culprit. Meanwhile, upstairs in the Buy More, Morgan deals with his own drama as Big Mike asks for his mother's hand in marriage. Also, Morgan gets a shocking phone call telling him he's only going to get 6 copies of the game Spy Hunter for their big video game release, and eventually this number gets narrowed down to 2. This is followed by more chaos as Hugo breaks out of his prison cell. Also, we have Casey threatening Castle's automated override system to get to Hugo, which was a quite hilarious sequence. And my friend who I watched the episode with was cracking up laughing because he had an argument with an automated, I think it was a teller system, a few days before. So he totally got that joke, and it made it quite funny that not only happened to Casey, but it happened to a real person as well. Also, we got a chase through the air vents, like in some of Chuck's favorite movies, such as Die Hard and Aliens, as Chuck mentions. We also had the most random Lester line and accent ever.
You don't just drop a roll in a man's lap and say, "Go seal, clap for your fish." I must make this my own if I am to undertake it.
And we also got to see Jeffster not doing music, but doing poetry, and a little bit of karate as well. Then, at the stroke of midnight, a riot breaks out at the Buy More due to them not having enough video games. And Chuck literally falls into a cage match with Hugo. And yes, now another pineapple incident is occurring at the Buy More. And I don't know what it is about these pineapples, but the energetic music, the editing, and the sheer madness of these sequences, with the Buy More just falling to pieces, have just really played a large part in giving Chuck the unique flair to make it this little show that could. Plus, on top of that, after 4 years, these sequences have just still not gotten old, and they never fail to make me laugh. This really goes to give credit to the directors, who've just done a good job of making something that another show would use as a gimmick, and just making it continuously fresh and entertaining. However, as fun as it was to see another pineapple ensue on my TV screen, it all ended because, and I'm channeling my inner WWF wrestler on this one, it all ended because Big Mike said so. Or his disco stick said so, as he tased Hugo to take him down at the end of this episode. This is followed up with another something this show does best: romantic tension, as Big Mike's engagement ring, which Morgan lost during the riot, falls down the air vents and into Chuck's hand, while he tries to calm Sarah's fear of being forced to settle down. So with that cliffhanger, I'm going to time machine out of my side of the discussion and hand things over to Nico.
On this episode, Dan, I'm on the other side of the fence. I could not stand Nicole Richie even more in this episode. She was annoying. I did not feel that her harassment of Sarah was at all helpful to the storyline, and I think that you said that you felt that it was in progressing the storyline. I felt like it was a cheap method of introducing or enhancing the issues raised in the previous episode between Chuck and Sarah about Sarah's inability to commit and Chuck wanting to settle down, or thinking, at least in his head, that they could be next for the marriage and baby route. I've really enjoyed this season of Chuck, but this episode was not the best in my opinion.
And once again, I'm Dan Schmidt.
And I'm Nico Reifsteck.
And until next week, we'll catch you on the airwaves.
We now return to our regularly scheduled program.